The knock came at precisely 10:42 a.m. Samantha froze, the cold, metallic echo of the doorbell sending a jolt of unease through her body. She had been sitting at the polished oak kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, glancing at the morning headlines on her phone. But that knock, sharp, insistent, was not part of her plans for the day. She hadn't expected anyone, especially not at this hour. Her life was scheduled, controlled, and well-ordered. That's how she liked it. Everything had its place, and nothing, no one, was allowed to disrupt the rhythm she'd carefully built over the years. And yet, here it was. A disturbance. She glanced toward the door, unsure of who might be on the other side. Her heart, usually so steady, skipped a beat. Could it be a delivery? An unexpected guest? Her mind raced through possibilities, none of them making sense in the calm of her home. The knock came again, more urgent this time. Samantha stood and walked toward the door, every step heavy with an unfamiliar sense of tension. She opened it, and there stood the last person she expected to see. Her mother. Samantha blinked, momentarily speechless. It wasn't just the surprise of her mother's arrival, it was the shock of seeing her mother standing on the doorstep, her frail, weathered face shadowed with something unspoken. "Mom?" Samantha's voice faltered as she fought to regain composure. She hadn't seen her mother in over a year, not since their last awkward conversation. Their relationship had always been strained, but over the years, it had become increasingly distant. "I'm sorry to just show up like this," her mother said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I had to come. I need to speak with you." Samantha's mind raced as she forced a polite smile, but inside, confusion and a sense of unease were beginning to creep in. Her mother had always been a mystery, stoic, distant, often leaving Samantha with more questions than answers. "Of course," Samantha said, stepping aside to let her in. "I didn't expect you, but it's good to see you." Her mother didn't smile, though. She didn't even look at Samantha, her eyes scanning the elegant foyer of the mansion. Samantha's home was a symbol of her success, sleek, modern, and meticulously designed. The walls were adorned with abstract art, the floor polished to a mirror-like shine. Everything had its place, just as Samantha had arranged it. But her mother's gaze swept across the room, barely lingering on any one detail, as if she were looking for something, or perhaps searching for nothing in particular. "What is it, Mom?" Samantha asked, trying to bridge the uncomfortable silence. "Why are you here?" Her mother turned toward her, and for the first time, Samantha noticed the weariness in her eyes. Her mother was older, of course, but there was something else, something deeper, something that made Samantha feel a shiver run down her spine. "I came because I've seen something," her mother said, her voice low. "Something I wasn't supposed to see. Something you should know about." Samantha frowned, a knot forming in her stomach. "What are you talking about? What did you see?" Her mother took a deep breath, her hands shaking ever so slightly as she placed them on the back of a nearby chair. "It's not something I expected to find when I came here, Samantha. I didn't come to cause trouble. I didn't come to upset you. But what I've found, what I've seen changes everything." Samantha's mind was spinning. What was she talking about? Was her mother talking about the house, about the family business, or something else entirely? "Mom, you're not making sense," Samantha said, her voice rising in frustration. "I don't know what you're saying. What are you talking about?" Her mother's gaze turned dark, almost haunted. She looked away, avoiding Samantha's eyes. "I didn't come here to cause a scene," she said. "But I need to show you something. Something you won't believe." Samantha stared at her mother, the pit in her stomach growing deeper. "Show me what?" Without a word, her mother turned and began walking toward the back of the house. Samantha hesitated, torn between confusion and an unsettling urge to follow. She had to know what her mother was talking about, what discovery, what secret could possibly have her so shaken? Samantha followed her mother, the silence between them heavy and uncomfortable. She could feel the tension radiating from her mother's every step. The sharp clicking of her mother's shoes on the polished floors was the only sound in the otherwise quiet house. They reached the back door. Her mother stopped in front of it, her hand resting on the handle as she turned toward Samantha. "I don't know how to explain this," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "But once you see it, nothing will be the same." Samantha's heart raced. What could it be? What could possibly be hidden in her home that would affect everything she knew? "Mom," Samantha began, but her words died in her throat as her mother opened the door and stepped outside. Her mother gestured for Samantha to follow. The backyard stretched out before them, an oasis of lush greenery and manicured hedges, the distant hum of the city barely reaching their ears. It was peaceful, serene, a sharp contrast to the chaos unfolding in Samantha's mind. "What is it, Mom?" Samantha asked again, her voice now filled with genuine concern. Her mother didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked toward the far end of the garden, near the back gate. Samantha's heart skipped a beat as she saw her mother's gaze lock onto something just beyond the fence. Her body stiffened, her face pale. Samantha followed her mother's line of sight and saw nothing. There was nothing unusual about the area. Just a neatly trimmed hedge and the tall wooden fence that separated her property from the one next door. "What is it?" Samantha demanded, unable to hold back any longer. "What are you seeing?" Her mother turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd arrived, there was a deep, almost frightened expression on her face. "I found something," her mother whispered. "Something in the garden. Something I wasn't supposed to find." Samantha's breath caught in her throat as her mind raced. What could it be? What could possibly be so terrible that it had her mother so shaken? Her mother motioned for Samantha to come closer, her eyes wide with fear. "Come here. I need you to see it." Samantha hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, her pulse quickening. What was going on? What was her mother about to show her? As they reached the spot her mother had pointed to, Samantha finally saw it. A small, weathered door, barely visible beneath a thick layer of ivy and overgrowth. It was half hidden, almost as though it had been intentionally concealed. The door was old, its wood cracked and faded. It didn't belong there, certainly not in the pristine, carefully manicured garden of Samantha's home. Where did this come from? Samantha whispered, her voice thick with confusion and fear. Her mother's voice was barely a murmur. "I don't know. But I've seen it before. And you need to know what's inside." Samantha's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the door. Something deep within her told her that this moment, this discovery, would change everything. The life she had so carefully built, the one that had kept her safe, secure, and untouched by the past, was about to be upended in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Samantha's gaze fixed on the weathered door, her heart beating faster as she took in the sight before her. It was half concealed under a blanket of ivy and overgrown vines, looking as though it had been forgotten by time itself. It didn't fit in with the neat, polished world of Samantha's home, a world she had worked so hard to build. This door, hidden away in the backyard, was a contradiction. And everything inside her told her that its presence here, in her perfect life, was no accident. Her mother stood beside her, eyes wide, lips trembling, waiting for Samantha to say something, anything. But Samantha could barely process what she was seeing. A door? Hidden away in the garden? It was absurd. This wasn't a shed, a tool cabinet, or even a secret vault. It was an old, dilapidated door, nothing more than a relic of the past that should have no place in a modern, luxurious home. "What is this?" Samantha's voice was a whisper, thick with confusion and fear. Her mother looked at the door, her expression tight, almost pained. "I didn't want to tell you about it, but you need to know. You have to understand. Samantha swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing thoughts. The world around her suddenly felt heavy, as if the very air were thick with something she couldn't quite grasp. "I've seen this door before," her mother said, her voice trembling. "Years ago, when your father and I lived here, before everything changed. Before we lost everything." Samantha's mind whirled. Her father had been gone for years now, and the memories of their family home, before the wealth, before the success, felt distant, almost foreign. Her mother had never spoken much about the past. She had always been focused on the present, on keeping things together. But now, standing there, she looked like someone who had just been jolted awake from a long slumber, like a buried memory was surfacing, something too painful to ignore. "You're not making sense, Mom," Samantha said, her voice shaky now. "What are you talking about? What's behind this door? What does it have to do with anything?" Her mother didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached forward, brushing her hand against the ivy that covered the door, her fingers trembling as she pulled the vines back. For a moment, all that was visible was the doorframe, old and worn, with rusted hinges that hadn't been used in years. But then, with a low creak, her mother pulled the door open slightly. The faint smell of damp earth and mold drifted out, the scent of something that had been shut away for far too long. Samantha's breath caught in her throat as she peered into the darkness beyond the door. She could see nothing at first, just shadows, thick with dust and age. But something in the air, something about the heaviness of the moment, made her feel as if she were standing at the threshold of a forgotten world. "Mom, what is this place?" Samantha asked again, her voice barely a whisper now, as if speaking too loudly might somehow disturb the silence of this strange, hidden space. Her mother's face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, something darker, more sorrowful. She reached for Samantha's hand, her grip tight and desperate. "I can't explain everything right now," her mother said, her voice raw. "But this door, this place, it's part of your father's secret. A secret he kept from me, and from you. A secret he didn't want you to know." Samantha's heart stopped. "What secret?" she demanded. "What are you talking about? Why didn't you tell me about this before?" Her mother took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself. "Because I didn't know how to. Because I was afraid. And because, deep down, I knew that once you learned the truth, there would be no going back." Samantha's pulse quickened, the weight of her mother's words sinking into her chest like a stone. What truth? What was Dad hiding? And why is this door here? Her mother looked back at the door, her eyes dark with fear. "He kept this from me. From everyone. He told me nothing about it until one night, years ago, the night everything fell apart." Samantha's mind raced as she tried to piece together the fragments of her mother's cryptic words. Her father had always been a man of mystery, but she'd never known him to hide something like this. He had been successful, powerful even, everything Samantha had always aspired to be. She had always assumed that his wealth had come from legitimate means, from hard work, from smart business deals. But now, with this hidden door and her mother's cryptic warnings, the pieces of her father's life were starting to seem less like a neat puzzle and more like a chaotic, unsettling mess. "You're not making sense," Samantha said, her voice cracking now. "What happened that night? What did Dad do?" Her mother closed her eyes, her face twisted with pain, as if the memories were too much to bear. She took another deep breath before speaking, her voice barely audible. "Your father was never just a businessman. He was involved in something much bigger, something dangerous." Her mother's eyes locked onto Samantha's, filled with a sorrow that made Samantha's heart sink. "And I think this door is connected to it." Samantha's mind was spinning. Her father, a man she had once looked up to as a role model, had been hiding something dangerous? What was this secret? What could it possibly be that had made her mother so terrified? How is this door connected to it? What's behind it? Samantha pressed, her fear now replaced with a growing need to understand. Her mother hesitated before answering. "I don't know everything, but I do know that he didn't want anyone to find out. And that's why he kept this door locked away. He never wanted anyone to stumble upon it, especially not you." The words hung heavy between them, the air thick with unspoken truths. Samantha felt a chill creep up her spine as she realized that the house she had so carefully curated, the life she had so meticulously built, was standing on the edge of something much darker than she could have ever imagined. "Are you saying that Dad was involved in something illegal?" Samantha asked, her voice trembling. Her mother's expression darkened. "I don't know. But there's only one way to find out." She stepped toward the door and motioned for Samantha to follow. Samantha hesitated. Every instinct in her told her to walk away, to leave this door closed and forget about whatever secret it held. But something deeper inside her, a burning curiosity, a desire to understand, pushed her forward. Without saying a word, Samantha followed her mother into the darkness behind the door. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air grew colder, heavier. Samantha's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she saw that the room beyond the door was nothing like the rest of the house. It was small, cramped, and smelled of musty wood and decay. The walls were lined with old shelves, filled with boxes, old papers, and objects she couldn't quite make out. The room seemed to be frozen in time, untouched by the modern world. "What is this place?" Samantha whispered, her voice echoing in the stillness. Her mother didn't answer at first. She walked to the far side of the room, where a large wooden chest sat, its surface covered in dust. "This was your father's hideaway," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "Where he kept everything from his past." Samantha's heart pounded as she moved toward the chest. The air felt thick with secrets, and she could sense that what she was about to discover would change everything. Her mother reached for the chest, her hands trembling as she lifted the heavy lid. Inside, there were piles of old papers, journals, and photographs, documents that seemed to have been hastily shoved inside, as if their contents were too dangerous to be seen. "Look at this," her mother said, pulling out a faded photograph. Samantha's eyes went wide as she recognized the figure in the photo. It was her father, standing next to a man she didn't recognize, both of them smiling in front of what appeared to be a large, old building. But there was something off about the photo, something in the man's eyes, a look that didn't sit right with her. "Who is this man?" Samantha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother's face was pale, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and sadness. "I don't know. But I think he's connected to everything." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. What had her father been involved in? And why had he kept all of this hidden from her, from everyone? She didn't know it yet, but the answers to these questions would lead her down a path she could never have imagined, a path filled with danger, betrayal, and a shocking truth that would change everything she thought she knew about her family, her life, and herself. Samantha's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the photograph her mother had handed her. The faded black and white image was both haunting and puzzling. Her father stood beside an unfamiliar man, tall, with sharp features and a cold, calculating gaze. The two were smiling, arms around each other, standing in front of an old, decrepit building. But something about the photo felt wrong. The atmosphere seemed off, the smiles forced, as if the men knew something that would never be spoken aloud. "Who is this man?" Samantha repeated, her voice trembling as she turned the photograph over in her hands, hoping for some clue, some answer that would make sense of this surreal situation. Her mother stood in silence, her face a mask of sorrow and fear. She avoided looking at the photo, her eyes instead fixed on the chest, the dusty remnants of her husband's secrets scattered around them. Her hand gripped the edge of the chest, white-knuckled. "I don't know," her mother said quietly. "Your father never spoke about him. But I have a feeling, a horrible feeling that he was part of something we weren't supposed to know." Samantha's mind raced. This wasn't the man she had known. Her father had always been the pillar of strength in her life, the person who taught her the value of hard work, discipline, and success. But this hidden world, this mysterious figure, this photograph, none of it matched the life she had been raised in. What was he involved in, Mom? Samantha's voice cracked as the weight of the moment pressed down on her. What was Dad hiding? Her mother let out a slow, shuddering breath, as if the weight of the question had brought back long-buried memories. She turned and moved toward the stack of papers in the chest. There are things you don't understand. Things I never wanted to believe were true. Samantha looked at her mother with a new sense of urgency. This was no longer just about the photograph. The atmosphere in the small, dimly lit room was charged with tension, like a door had just been opened to a place neither of them was prepared to face. The questions, the uncertainties, hung in the air like a thick fog. What had her father been involved in? And why had he kept it hidden from them? Her mother flipped open one of the journals in the chest, the yellowed pages curling at the edges. These journals. I found them in your father's things after he passed away. I never could bring myself to read them, not until now. But I think it's time. Samantha stepped closer, her heart pounding. What's in them? Her mother's hands shook as she leafed through the pages, her eyes scanning the words with growing unease. Your father was involved in something dangerous. This man, the one in the photograph, his name was Alexei Volkov. A name I wish I had never heard. Samantha's breath caught. Alexei Volkov? Why does that name sound familiar? Her mother's eyes flicked up to meet hers. You've heard the rumors, haven't you? About the Russian crime syndicates, the underground operations? The things that go on behind closed doors? She paused, as if she herself couldn't quite believe the words she was speaking. Your father wasn't just a businessman. He was part of a much darker world. And Volkov was the key to it. Samantha felt as though the ground beneath her was crumbling. She had never imagined her father, her hero, the man who had taught her how to navigate the corporate world, was involved in something so sinister. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. How could her father, the man she trusted above all others, have been hiding a past like this? But why? Why would he get involved in something like that? Samantha asked, her voice hoarse with disbelief. Her mother closed the journal with a soft thud, a sense of finality in her gesture. I don't know, Sam. I don't know. He was always secretive about his business dealings. I always just assumed he was cautious, playing it safe. But now, I see it. I see the lies. I see the dangerous game he was playing. Samantha felt a deep sense of betrayal rising in her chest. The man she had idolized, the man who had always seemed above reproach, had been living a double life. How had she never seen the signs? How had her mother never told her? Her thoughts were interrupted when her mother suddenly stood, pulling another item from the chest, a small, leather-bound notebook. She handed it to Samantha with trembling hands. I found this among your father's things. It's the key to everything, her mother said. If we can figure out what's in it, we might finally understand what happened. Samantha took the notebook, feeling its weight in her hands. The leather was worn, as if it had been handled countless times. She ran her fingers over the edges of the pages before slowly flipping it open. The handwriting inside was sharp, precise, like something important had to be documented with care. The first page was dated nearly 2 decades ago, just after Samantha's birth. She read the words aloud. The deal is set. Volkov has agreed to work with us. The shipment will arrive next month. We need to prepare for the risks involved. This is bigger than anything we've done before. If this works, we're untouchable. Samantha's mind was spinning. The deal? Volkov? Shipment? Untouchable? What is this? Samantha whispered. What deal? What shipment? Her mother took a step closer, her face pale and drawn. I don't know, but I think it has something to do with the Russian syndicates. The underground world your father got involved in. And if what's written here is true, then your father made a decision that changed everything. The next few pages were filled with cryptic notes, references to deals, shipments, and even the names of people Samantha had never heard of. It felt like reading a secret history of her father's life, one that had never been spoken of, not even after his death. There were mentions of people in other countries, Brussels, London, Moscow. The pages were filled with transactions, names, and dates. But the one that stood out to Samantha was a single sentence scrawled on the last page. If anything happens to me, they'll come for you. Stay hidden. Do not trust anyone. The word sent a chill down Samantha's spine. She could barely process what she was reading. Had her father known something was coming? Had he known his life, his empire, was in danger? Her mother's voice broke through her thoughts. He was trying to protect us, Sam. But I don't think he realized how deep he was in. The deeper he went, the harder it became to get out. And when it all came crashing down, her voice trailed off, the sadness in her eyes reflecting years of grief and fear. Samantha's hand trembled as she closed the notebook. The weight of her father's secret life, his involvement in something so dangerous, so far removed from everything she had believed about him, hung heavily in the air. The man she had thought she knew was not the man her mother had married. A cold silence filled the room as Samantha tried to absorb the magnitude of what she had just uncovered. Her father had kept this from her for a reason, and now she was left to pick up the pieces of a life that had been built on lies. What do we do now? Samantha finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother didn't answer right away. She took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room as though trying to gather her thoughts. I don't know, Sam. But we can't just leave this. We need to figure out what happened to your father. We need to find out what he was involved in, what he was trying to protect us from. Samantha felt the weight of her mother's words. She had come here expecting to uncover some kind of family mystery, but now she was facing something far darker. Her father's life, the life she had known and revered, had been built on lies, secrets, and danger. And whatever had happened to him, whatever had been hidden, wasn't just history. It was still very much alive. Suddenly, a noise outside the room startled them both. A faint scraping sound, as if something, or someone, was moving just beyond the doorway. Samantha's heart skipped a beat. Her mother's eyes widened, filled with a quiet alarm. Someone's here. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. Who could it be? Had someone followed them here? Was the danger her father had faced still out there, hunting them? The sound grew louder, closer. And then, without warning, the door to the room opened. The door creaked open slowly, the sound echoing through the small, musty room like a distant warning. Samantha's heart raced, every muscle in her body tensing as she instinctively moved closer to her mother, who stood rigid beside her. The room, once quiet and still, suddenly felt charged with an invisible energy, like a storm was brewing just beyond the threshold. Samantha's eyes darted to the darkened doorway, her breath catching in her throat. The shadowy figure standing there seemed almost unreal, like a ghost from a past they had both tried to bury. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by the dim light. But it wasn't just his appearance that sent a shiver down Samantha's spine, it was the aura of danger that seemed to radiate from him, the cold presence that felt as if it had been waiting in the wings for years. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, a gasp escaping her lips as she recoiled slightly. Samantha, sensing her mother's fear, felt her own pulse quicken. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the words stuck in her throat. The man in the doorway didn't move at first. He simply stood there, his posture rigid, watching them with an unnerving stillness. Samantha's mind raced. Was this one of her father's associates? Someone from his past, someone who had been a part of that dark, hidden world? The man stepped forward, his boots thudding softly against the floor, and for the first time, Samantha could see his face more clearly. His features were sharp, cold, and familiar in a way that unsettled her even more. The harsh lines of his face, the way his dark eyes locked onto hers, it was as if he had been watching her for a long time, waiting for the right moment to make his move. "Hello, Samantha," he said, his voice low and smooth, with an accent that sent a chill through her. It wasn't a local accent, it was Russian, unmistakably, and it hit her like a punch to the gut. "I've been looking for you." The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous, and Samantha felt an instinctive shiver of fear. Her mind screamed at her to run, to get away from this man, but her legs felt frozen in place. She could feel her mother's grip tighten on her arm, and she glanced over to see her mother's face drained of color. The woman looked like she had just seen a ghost. Samantha managed to find her voice, though it trembled with unease. "Who are you?" she demanded, her tone edged with panic. "What do you want from us?" The man's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm not here for you, not exactly," he said, his eyes flicking briefly to her mother before returning to Samantha. "I'm here for the truth. And to make sure certain things stay buried." Samantha's heart skipped a beat. "The truth?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "What truth?" Her mother stepped forward, her face filled with a strange mixture of fear and recognition. You're one of them, aren't you?" she asked, her voice shaking. The man's expression hardened for a moment, and then he gave a short nod. "I'm here because your husband, Samantha's father, left things unfinished. And now it's time to pay the price." Samantha's stomach dropped as the realization hit her. This man wasn't just an associate. He was connected to the very danger her father had been a part of. This man was a reminder of the shadowy world that had claimed her father's life, and now, it was coming for them. Her mother backed away slightly, her eyes wide with fear. We didn't know what he was involved in," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Please, just leave us alone. We have nothing to do with any of this." The man's gaze flicked to the chest in the corner of the room, the one that had revealed her father's dark secrets just moments ago. His eyes narrowed as he saw the worn notebooks and papers scattered across the floor. It was clear he knew what they had uncovered. It was clear he knew they had stumbled upon the truth, just as he had known they would. "You're wrong, Mrs. Warren," he said, his voice cold. "You have everything to do with this. Your husband's mistakes, his secrets, they're yours now, whether you like it or not. And I've come to make sure you understand that." Samantha felt her blood run cold. The man's words hit her like a wave of ice-cold water. "What do you want from us?" she demanded, forcing the words out despite the fear choking her throat. He stepped into the room fully now, his eyes scanning the shelves, the old boxes, and papers that her father had left behind. "I want what your father owed," he said simply. "The debt he left unfinished. There's still a price to pay, and you are the only ones who can settle it." Samantha's mind was reeling. "What debt? What are you talking about?" The man paused, his gaze lingering on her, and then he turned back to her mother. "I see he didn't tell you everything." "How convenient," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But it's not too late. You can still fix this." Her mother's face twisted in confusion and fear. "Fix what? What do you mean?" The man's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. "I mean you can pay back what's owed. Your father made a deal, and you're going to honor it, one way or another." Samantha was on the edge of losing control. "What deal? What is this? What do you want from us?" Her words were frantic, desperate. He looked at her, and for a moment, there was something almost sympathetic in his gaze. "Your father was involved in a shipment. A very special shipment. It was supposed to arrive, and it never did. That's where the debt lies." And now, the people who were supposed to receive it are coming after you. Samantha's blood ran cold. Shipment? What kind of shipment? The man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing, and he lowered his voice. That's not something you need to know right now. What you need to know is that you're in danger. Your father made enemies, very dangerous ones. And now, they're after you. Samantha's heart was pounding in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her father had been involved in something that had led to a dangerous, unresolved deal, and now they were paying the price for it. The weight of it all settled on her shoulders like a crushing burden, and she felt her knees go weak. Her mother stepped forward, her voice trembling. "How do you know all of this?" she asked, her eyes searching his face for answers. The man gave a small, humorless laugh. "I've been in this business a long time, Mrs. Warren. I know how these things work. Your husband made sure to cover his tracks, but nothing stays hidden forever." Samantha's mind raced. This was no longer just about her father's secret life. This was about their survival. She could feel the walls closing in around them, the weight of the danger pressing down with each passing second. What had her father gotten them into? How could they possibly get out of this mess? The man's eyes glinted with something that wasn't just coldness, there was something darker, more predatory in his gaze. "You have two options," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "You can cooperate, hand over what's left of your father's empire, and try to live. Or you can refuse, and things will get much worse." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. "Cooperate with what? What do you want from us?" The man's smile deepened. "We'll talk more about that soon enough. But for now, let me just say this, you are not safe. Not yet. But you will be, if you do as I say." The tension in the room was palpable, and Samantha knew, without a doubt, that nothing would ever be the same. They had opened a door that should have remained shut. And now, the dangerous world her father had been a part of was coming for them, one step closer with every passing second. Samantha took a deep breath, her mind racing. She didn't know what the next step would be, or how they could survive this. But she knew one thing for sure, she couldn't let her father's mistakes define the rest of her life. There had to be a way out of this, a way to fight back. And she was going to find it. The cold air in the room seemed to thicken as the man's words sank in. Samantha's mind raced, processing everything he had just said. They weren't just dealing with a criminal past. They were dealing with a deadly game that had been set in motion long before they'd ever known it existed. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as if the walls of the room were closing in on her. Her father had made enemies, dangerous ones, and now, it was their turn to face the consequences. But she couldn't just accept what the man was saying. She couldn't let the past dictate her future, no matter how dark it had been. Samantha's hand tightened around the leather-bound notebook her father had left behind. She had read the cryptic words in that book and seen the threats within them, but it hadn't quite hit her until now. Everything was real. This wasn't just a story from her father's past. This was their reality now. Her mother, who had been silent since the man's arrival, finally spoke, her voice weak but resolute. "You can't just come into our home and demand we hand over everything. We have nothing left to give." Her words were quiet, but there was a fire behind them, a protective instinct that Samantha knew too well. Her mother wasn't one to back down easily. The man's gaze hardened, his eyes narrowing. "You're right," he said coldly. "You don't have much left to give. But your father's debts don't care about that." His voice dropped to a low murmur. "The debt your father owed wasn't just monetary. It was about power. Control. Influence. And now, you're the ones who have to make it right. Or else, there will be consequences." Samantha's heart raced. Consequences. What did that even mean? And why her? Why her mother? She glanced at her mother, who looked as if she might collapse under the weight of the man's words. "We don't know what you're talking about," Samantha said, her voice steadier now. "We don't know anything about any of this." The man took a step forward, his shadow casting over both of them. "You may not know the specifics, but your father was involved in something much bigger than you realize. And now, you're going to help finish what he started." Samantha swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. "Finish what he started," she repeated. "What does that even mean?" "Your father was part of a network. A very influential one," the man explained, his voice almost casual, as if discussing something as ordinary as the weather. "And that network had big plans. Your father was going to be a key player in all of it. But then something went wrong. The shipment, the one he was supposed to help with, it never arrived. And now, people want answers. People who don't like being kept waiting." Samantha felt a sudden wave of nausea rise in her chest. The shipment. She had read about it in the journals, but now the reality of it hit her like a freight train. Her father had been involved in something so much darker than she had ever imagined. This wasn't just about money or business deals. This was about power, and the loss of it. "So, what now?" Samantha asked, her voice shaking despite her attempts to sound confident. "What are we supposed to do? Just hand over everything we have?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it, just a coldness that made her skin crawl. "It's not that simple, Samantha. Your father made a deal. He was going to deliver something for someone very powerful. That's why they came to him. He was the one who could make it happen. But now, you're the one who has to make sure the deal is completed. Or else." "Or else what?" her mother asked, her voice trembling. "What will happen to us?" The man's smile faded, replaced by a dark, almost predatory look. "You're going to pay for your father's failure, one way or another. The people who were waiting for that shipment won't stop until they get what they want. They'll come for you, your family, your home, everything you have." The words hit Samantha like a blow to the gut. She had never imagined that her father's past could come back to haunt them like this. But now, it was clear, there was no escaping it. The debts her father had left behind were too large to ignore. And they were about to become her and her mother's responsibility. "Why us?" Samantha asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why don't you just go to whoever's behind all of this? Why target us?" The man's expression softened slightly, though it was still cold. "Because you're the only ones left. Your father had allies, but they're gone now. And you have the one thing they need, the key to finishing what he started. The documents he left behind. The journals. The connections he made." He paused, his eyes flicking to the chest in the corner of the room. "And it's up to you to figure out how to use them. You have to finish what your father began." Samantha felt her stomach churn. How could they possibly finish something they didn't even understand? Her father had been involved in something massive, something far beyond her comprehension, and now she and her mother were supposed to clean up the mess he had left behind? Her mother stood up straighter, her eyes narrowing. "You're asking us to take on your mess. This is your problem, not ours." The man's eyes flicked to her mother, a sharp glint of amusement in them. "You can keep pretending it's not your problem, Mrs. Warren. But the truth is, you're already in too deep. If you want to live, if you want to keep your home and your lives intact, you'll have to finish what your husband started." The air seemed to grow even colder as the man's words echoed through the room. Samantha's mind raced. There had to be another way. There had to be a way out of this, a way to escape the web of lies her father had spun. But everything around her told her that there was no easy escape. The danger was real. The people her father had angered were real. And now, Samantha and her mother were trapped in a game they didn't fully understand, with no clear way to win. "How do we even start?" Samantha asked, her voice cracking slightly as she looked at the man, her eyes filled with desperation. How are we supposed to finish what he started? The man's lips curled into a faint smile. You'll figure it out, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. You've already started. All the answers you need are in your father's journals. He left everything for you. You just need to follow the path he set out for you. Samantha's eyes flicked to the chest, where the journals were still scattered across the floor. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her father had left her and her mother everything they needed to finish the job, but it wasn't going to be easy. She had to figure out what he had been involved in, who the players were, and how to navigate the dangerous world he had been a part of. And all the while, the threat of those who wanted the shipment hanging over her head. Why are you helping us? Samantha asked suddenly, her voice sharp. You don't have to do any of this. You could just take what you want and leave. The man's eyes gleamed with something that was almost amusement. I'm not here to help you, Samantha. I'm here to make sure things go according to plan. You may not realize it yet, but you're already part of this world. And now, you have a choice. You can either work with me, or you can watch everything you love fall apart. Samantha clenched her fists, the weight of his words settling heavily on her chest. There was no way out. Not unless she took control of the situation, unless she found a way to turn the tables. But the question remained, how? The sun had barely risen when Samantha sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the last few days pressing down on her like an anchor in deep water. She had spent hours last night going through her father's journals again, piecing together the fragments of his life she had never known. Each entry she uncovered seemed to add more layers of darkness to the life he had led, and to the dangers that now surrounded her. Her mother had hardly slept at all. She paced the house in a daze, as though the walls themselves were closing in on her. Samantha understood her mother's fear, her helplessness. But there was no time for fear now. If they were going to survive this, they needed to act, decisively, quickly. The man who had come to their door, the one who had linked them to her father's criminal past, hadn't left. He'd stayed in the guest room, lurking like a shadow, always present. Every time Samantha looked at him, she felt a rush of anger and fear that almost choked her. She hated how calm he was, how sure of himself. He held the power, and they were just two women caught in a world they didn't understand. But she wasn't about to let fear rule her life. Not anymore. Samantha stood up from the table and walked to the window, staring out at the overcast sky. The world seemed quiet, distant, untouched by the chaos she was living through. But she knew it wouldn't stay that way. The storm was coming. It had already begun. Her fingers brushed the edge of the journal on the table. It had answers. Answers she desperately needed. Samantha, her mother called from the hallway, her voice shaky. We need to talk. Samantha turned to face her mother, her gaze steady. What is it? Her mother walked into the room, her hands trembling as she clutched a piece of paper. I found something, she said softly, her eyes darting between Samantha and the journal. I think your father left us something, something important. Samantha's heart raced. What do you mean? Her mother unfolded the paper, revealing an address written in her father's handwriting. This, she said, this is where he was supposed to meet someone. He was supposed to give them something, but he never did. It could be the key to all of this. Maybe it's the missing piece we need. Samantha looked at the paper, her thoughts a whirlwind. She knew they couldn't trust the man in the guest room, not fully. He had his own agenda. But this address, this was something concrete. It was a lead, something that might allow them to take control of the situation. We need to go there, Samantha said, her voice firm. Her mother hesitated, her fear palpable. What if it's a trap? What if they're waiting for us? Samantha walked over to her mother and took her hand. We won't know unless we try. We can't just wait for them to come after us. We have to take the first step. Her mother nodded, though her face was still pale. "Okay. But we need to be careful." Samantha's mind was already racing. They couldn't trust anyone, not the man in the house, not even the documents her father had left behind. They were on their own now. If they were going to get through this, they needed to be smart, resourceful. They needed to stay one step ahead. After a moment, her mother spoke again. "We'll need to pack. If this is the answer, if it leads to what we need, we'll have to be ready for anything." Samantha nodded, already moving toward the door. "I'll go get the car ready." As she walked outside, the chill in the air seemed to mirror the cold dread that had settled in her chest. Every decision they made from this point forward could be their last. But there was no going back. There never had been. The drive to the address was long and uneventful, the landscape around them slipping by in a blur of gray skies and barren fields. Samantha kept her eyes on the road, her mind focused, while her mother sat quietly beside her, lost in thought. The weight of their situation was heavy on both of them, but they had no choice now. The decision had been made. The address led them to an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was tucked away from the main roads, hidden behind tall fences and overgrown hedges. The building itself was decrepit, with broken windows and a faded sign hanging crookedly above the entrance. The place looked abandoned, forgotten by time. But Samantha knew better than to believe appearances. This was the location. This was where everything would come to a head. Samantha parked the car a few blocks away, keeping a cautious distance. The man had said this was where it all started. Where the deal had gone wrong. Now, it was time for them to find out why. She and her mother stepped out of the car, both of them glancing nervously around the empty street. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, a low, mournful sound that seemed to echo the uncertainty in Samantha's chest. "Stay close," Samantha said, her voice low. "We don't know who's here, or what's waiting for us." Her mother nodded, gripping her arm tightly as they approached the warehouse. The door was slightly ajar, just wide enough for them to slip inside. Samantha hesitated for only a moment before pushing the door open, the old hinges creaking in protest. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, the air thick with dust and the scent of rust and decay. The space was cavernous, filled with old crates and discarded machinery. It looked like no one had been here in years. "Stay alert," Samantha whispered to her mother, her senses on high alert. Every corner, every shadow felt like a threat. They moved slowly through the space, their footsteps muffled by the grime-covered floor. Samantha's heart beat loudly in her chest, each step bringing them closer to whatever had been hidden here. The place felt like a tomb, silent, suffocating, and full of secrets that had long been buried. They finally reached the back of the warehouse, where a small office stood. The door was closed, but there was a faint light shining from underneath. Samantha motioned for her mother to wait as she approached, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the handle. With a quick, careful motion, she opened the door. Inside, the office was small but well-maintained. A desk sat against the far wall, papers and files scattered across it. But it wasn't the desk that caught Samantha's attention. It was the man standing by the window, his back to them, looking out over the darkened landscape. "Samantha," the man said, his voice cool and familiar. "I've been expecting you." Her breath caught in her throat. It was him, the man who had come to their house. The man who had linked them to their father's past. And now, here he was again, standing in front of them like he had all the answers. But Samantha wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had been replaced by something else, determination. They were here for answers, and she was going to get them. "Who are you?" Samantha asked, her voice steady, though the anger in her chest was palpable. The man turned slowly to face her, a smirk on his face. "I'm the one who holds the key to your father's legacy," he said. "And now, I'm here to see if you're worthy of it." Her mother gasped, but Samantha didn't flinch. "What do you want from us?" she demanded. "We're not here to play your games." The man's smirk faded, his eyes hardening. "What I want is simple," he said. "I want to see if you can finish what your father started. If you can step into his shoes. Because if you can't." He didn't finish his sentence. Instead, there was a sudden, loud bang, and the lights flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. Samantha's heart pounded in her chest as she heard movement behind her. A cold, sinking feeling spread through her as she realized the true danger they were in. They were no longer alone. The reckoning had begun.